Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Henley, and today we're going to talk about building occasionally connected systems in SQL Server 2008. Visual Studio 2008 has been engineered from the ground up to support the easy and rapid development of occasionally connected applications. To see how this works, let's create a simple application that uses a local data store to cache and browse product data from the Northwind Traders database. Now we'll begin by creating a new Windows Forms application project in Visual Studio, which we'll name Sync Services. Now once this project has been created, we're going to add a new item to the project solution called a local database cache. Now this new service will manage the local caching of the data for the application. So we'll go into Sync Services, and we'll go ahead and we'll add that new component. Let's give it an appropriate name. Looks good, and let's go ahead and add the item. Now, after we've added the local database cache to the solution, this configure data synchronization dialog box will pop up. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is select the database that we want this application to connect to, which in our case is going to be SQL 2008 Express Northwind database object. Now, once we've selected our database, we can specify which tables we want to be able to access locally through the cache. Now in this case, we're going to go in and we're going to select the customers, the employees, and the shippers table. Now notice as we do this, here we go, each table that's selected, Visual Studio applies smart defaults to a variety of options, including how to handle data, updates, inserts, and delete items. Now, once the Configure Tables for Offline dialog box has been closed, Visual Studio 2008 will generate and run the server-side SQL scripts to make the recommended changes to the database to accommodate the synchronization. Now, the scripts need to replicate and undo those changes are added to the solution. Now returning to our data synchronization dialog, we're going to grab this code sample that shows how to refresh the local cache and synchronize it with the database, since we will actually need it later in the demo. Now accepting our changes to the main configured data synchronization dialog, Visual Studio will now create the SQL data file, or the SDF file, that's used to store the local data cache and then synchronize with the primary data source to populate the cache with the data. Now immediately after the dialog box closes, we're presented with another dialog box. Again, data source configuration. At this point, we would go and select the three tables that we configured for offline use, and then go ahead and close configuration. Now we're going to use the Server Explorer, and we're going to browse through the structure for the Northwind database. In addition to the three cache tables we've already added to the project, we're going to add the orders and the order details table. Now, since we have not configured these tables for data synchronization, they're going to require live access to the Northwind database to actually retrieve the data. Now we need to make some changes to fields associated with the orders table to better define how they'll be used as part of our sample application. What we want to do here is change the order ID to be used as a label field. And then we want to change several other items to be used as drop-down combo boxes. Now, after we finish defining how we'll use these data fields, we can simply grab the entire orders entity and then drag it onto our blank form design surface. So let's go in and let's change the field types first. So we said orders ID, we want to be a label, and then we're going to change customer ID and we're going to add a combo box. And we'll take employee ID and do the same thing. And last but not least, we should probably go to ship via, and we should probably change that one to combo box as well. So after we finish defining how we use the data fields, we'll grab the orders entity, we'll drag it onto the blank form design surface, and you can see that Visual Studio will simply automatically populate the form with all of the correct data fields and has even added a toolbar that will allow us to page through the order records. Now behind the scenes, Visual Studio has created a significant amount of code to support this form, including all the code that binds the data fields to the form controls. Now to wrap our application up, we just need to finish binding our other data entities to their respective form controls. We'll simply grab the customer entity and drag it into the customer ID field, and then we'll repeat the process and we'll drag employees and shippers. Now we're ready to test this application and see how it works. Now before we run the application, let's pull up the SQL Profiler tool so we can watch what happens on the Northwind database while the application is actually running. Now, once we're in Profiler, we'll create a new trace to watch the activity on the Northwind database using a template that we've already created. So let's go in, let's choose SQL Express, our appropriate database. And we'll connect, and here's our template. Let's go ahead and give this a simple trace name. We'll call it Sync Services Trace. I make sure that I use the OCS template, and we'll go ahead and run the trace. Okay, trace is started. Let's go ahead and switch back to Visual Studio and compile our application.